volunteer run con.
Absolutely.
But I thought you would be a great person for this panel because your experience goes beyond that. It goes into other game systems, writing novels and stuff like that. So I was like, who better to come in and impart a little bit of knowledge to the rest of us about it than you. So I had an awesome time interviewing you at PAX. That was a lot of fun, man.
That was a ton of fun. It was fun just to get a chance to play. I don't get to, if it's not playtesting stuff, I generally don't get a chance to play that often, maybe once every couple of months. So it was fun just to get a chance to actually, roll some dice and be goofy with people who like to game. So it was awesome.
Well, good, man. I'm glad we were able to have you do that. So, like I said, I chatted you over. I sent you a direct message, and I figured I'd ask you a few general questions that kind of assumed would come up, and then as we've got about 30 minutes here, so I figured I'll keep an eye here on the chat, and whatever comes up, I'll throw that question to you, and we'll just kind of move from there. So looks like we've got a handful of people in here. It's 1:31 now. So selfishly, I was going to start. Well, actually, let's do this. Why don't you go ahead and tell us, introduce yourself to everybody, and let everyone know that kind of what your credentials in Everyday Heroes or Evil Genius games are, just to give everyone a nice baseline.
Okay. I'm Brian C.P. Steele. My official title is the producer and lead developer for all of our sci-fi games at Everyday Heroes at Evil Genius Games. But originally I hired on, I think I'm coming up on my second year anniversary, I think. I was originally brought on, I did a couple of just convention spot adventures to kind of help out with the, just little freelance gigs. And somewhere along the lines, Dave was like, hey, you like sci-fi stuff? We've got this thing that you need to sign some NDAs for. Are you familiar with Zack Snyder? Which, if you haven't looked at my shrine to Aquaman and my Man of Steel tattoo, and I'm familiar. And so I jumped on to be part of the Rebel Moon project. That we worked through that for a long time, and then when that ended up closing its doors and whatnot, by that point, Dave had already put me in the position to be producing our sci-fi line. So I just immediately kind of shifted gears into doing, Kong Skull Island, Total Recall, Pacific Rim, those kinds of things. And then that blossomed into Intergalactic Heroes and so forth and so on.
All right. Excellent, man. I appreciate that. Well, I figured I had a question that I wanted to start off with. And then, like I said, anyone in the can throw up their questions in the chat, and I'll deliver them over. But for me, it's more general. I mean, I know you've done some work, within these systems that are like, all right, well, here's the IP that we're doing. Like, give us something with that. Same thing with the Shadowrun novels. Hey, here's the world of Shadowrun. Play inside of that. Create this or that. But for me, like when you start creating something, creating a universe, creating a story to play within, what is your jumping off point? Would you say you start with characters? Would you start with the setting? Would you start with lore? Like, where does that build out? Where's your foundation at? Because I know a lot of people will start with, oh, well, it all surrounds this character, and then I'll build out from the character. Or here's the world that they live in, and then I'll build into the character, and vice versa. So where does your...
I think part of it is, I'm going to give the business answer initially. Part of it is also what the client asks. Because, when I've done several Shadowrun novels, and I still have several more to go. Oftentimes when we sit down and have that conversation of, okay, what's it going to be? What am I pitching? Sometimes it's completely whole cloth. The editor over there is just like, what do you want to put on the page? And then I get to have a complete sandbox and playground. But other times it'll be, all right, we've got this big meta plot that we're dealing with. We need you to do a story based off of the resurgence of this thing, or this guy died in the game. Please do something that's the echo of that. If it's something that I'm being instructed, it's weird. It's easier to come up with the plot line if you've got kind of the breadcrumbs already laid out. Like the outline's not written, but you kind of know the confines, the bookends of what your story needs to be about. It's easy to just jump in and then grab inspiration from something, whether it's a song or a movie or a comic or something that goes, that's a really cool thing. I'd like to take my spin on it. Or it might just be like a turn of phrase. Like I'll be watching TV, watching some show or whatever, and like two characters have a conversation and something is said and I go, oh, that's a pretty cool line, but I wonder if it could be made cooler. And then you just kind of start spitballing off of that. If it's something where I can completely whole cloth, like just go nuts, do your thing, make a world, make a setting, make an adventure, I generally start with a scene. Like whether it is, the characters involved might be mannequins in my head. Like they might actually not be defined in any way. They're just kind of gray blobs doing gray blob things, but I know what I want that scene to be. And I want that scene, but sometimes it might not even be like a climactic moment. It might just be, man, I really would love to have two dudes fighting with skateboards, like a skateboard duel. Not like skateboarding, but like a skateboard duel. And then just write it down and I'll put it. If for all the people who were like, Brian didn't register on Warhorn for this, it's because I am bad at computer stuff. I like playing video games, but that's mostly because it's push button and do a thing. I am as old school Luddite, like my desk is covered in Post-it notes. I've got 12 different pens and highlighters. So like I'll be watching something on one of my other screens while I'm working. And if I get one of those triggers, that could be a cool thing, I will scribble it down, and they're all sticky pads. So I will just like slap it on something, and then I have found notes before that make no sense. Like I'll pick it up and be like, I really should have taken a better note because Apple Bagel Duel doesn't matter. I don't know what this means. And you like just get set off to the side and forget all about it. But when it comes to the important stuff, I might take 5 minutes away from what I'm doing and quickly jot down a rough concept and just get set aside. My hard drive is filled with half-baked ideas because I never know when that might pop up, or it might be able to come back around, or I might get a lull in my freelancey type stuff and I'll pitch something to somebody. But where I generally tend to start is almost always universally a scene. There, whether it's the beginning, the end, or a moment that I want to see come to life in some capacity, that's where the seed gets planted, and then it just kind of funguses out from there.
Oh, well, I like that. I mean, if it works, it works.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, yeah, I mean, like as far as I know you're involved in a lot of different projects and stuff like that. When was the last time you said that like you created something that you were running like in a personal game? Or I mean, do you have time for things like that?
That's a hard question. That's harder than you think it is. I was running a Transformers game for a while, a couple of years ago, when I was still over at Renegade doing Transformers. But again, at the back of my head, I'm like, that's still kind of playtesting. Yeah, I don't think I've ran something. Nope, I lied. It'd have been last year. 2 years ago. Oh my gosh. So about 2 years ago, one of the subscribers for my YouTube show bought me a 3D printer, and I started printing D&D figures, as you do. And I decided, I was like, you know what? I've got all these figures. I'm going to paint them. It's going to be this super epic, fully immersion, all painted 3D maps and terrain and all this D&D style game. I think we ran around 7 or 8 sessions before life caught up with me and was like, you don't have time to do any of this stuff right now. But yeah, so I think about 2 years ago is when I ran something that had nothing to do with a project in some capacity.
Interesting.
Just running
I
something
imagine
for
all those
fun.
feel personal to a degree, though, like
They
when
do.
you're
They do.
creating it. So you kind of get that out of it.
Well, I think there's a big difference between running a game that has playtest elements in it, because I might not actually tell my players that, you know, I'm putting this monster in here because I want to find out if it's too tough, or, you know, here's this kind of system within a system, and I want to see if how they react to it. Than actually sitting down and being like, all right, guys, we're going to run through 3 combats back to back to back. You're going to play this character. You're going to play than an actual like hard, crunchy playtest. So I don't know. I think if something that was completely just for fun, no playtest backing whatsoever, probably about 2 years ago. Everything else, but I still game all the time. It's just almost always work related.
Yeah, well, that's not bad if it's work related, you know?
I mean, I can't complain. I know it sounds like, oh, you know, I have to play games for a living, but yeah. I mean, like it's. I think that's probably the last time that I did anything that was just strictly for fun.
Okay, well, that's good, man. As far as, well, since you brought up Everyday Arcana, or I'm sorry, Intergalactic Heroes.
Yep.
There's so many books floating around right now, it's hard to. What to you, like when it went from the Rebel Moon over to Intergalactic Heroes? Was there anything that got like kind of lost in that shuffle that you were like, damn, I was looking forward to seeing that come to fruition? Or was there anything that you were like, okay, great, now I have latitude to do this?
The I can say both. The Lost to the Agreement, there was a lot of really cool stuff behind the scenes in the scripts. A lot of stuff that was like world building that we did that the films can't really show because it's kind of deep crunch. Whereas the game could have helped kind of reveal some of that things that if someone may have missed it on screen, or it may have been something cut, from the final version. That stuff would have been really cool to be able to say, hey, remember that thing that you saw in the movie for like 1 second? Here's a full page on that. That would have been pretty cool. So losing that, it is what it is. That was part of the whole situation. But what we did gain, and to bring it back to the actual topic of today, is by not having to be bound to the Rebel Moon constraints, giving our first actual core sci-fi game, it gave us our ability to actually build our first true. I mean, the Nacho IP for Ego is kind of its own world, but this is the first time that we've been able to publish an actual. This is a setting. It is a setting with its own narrative and its own history and its own backdrops and its origins and hopefully a line of adventures that goes from now until the end of time. But it gave us an actual complete sandbox. We were no longer penned in on what we wanted, what we could do, and we were like, all right, well, let's build a story. Let's actually do, make a game that can be used for your sci-fi needs. But also, if you're maybe not the person who wants to run something that you've already seen or come up with your own homebrew, here you go. Here's your backdrop. Here's your sandbox. Here's your story. Play. And I think that's probably the thing that made me that turned what kind of somewhat felt like a loss, losing the Rebel Moon license and having to turn it into IGH. Initially, it felt a little bit like it had a sting to it. It was a very bittersweet moment, but realizing that it gave me the opportunity to write the Throne World saga and turn it into an IP of its own, it completely flipped that on the end. And now it was like, all right, no, this can be something really cool and really great, and we can have our own direction, our own style built for it.
It's interesting because I kind of forget about it sometimes that like in Everyday Heroes there is no lore. It's just here's a system that takes place in the world that we all know, we all
Yep.
exist in. Here's a rule set. Do whatever you want with it. I mean, there's a cinematic universes, and those come in. In the vault, they're changed down a little bit to kind of strip away some of that cinematic element to it, and be like, all right, put these in your world. So yeah, I never really thought about it that way. That the Intergalactic Heroes is like, hey, like here's a world that you can now build, and give it some lore and give it some background. So it looks like we've got a question from Baron Vark. Will there be tools for building galaxies, universes, a la Traveler?
I think so. I don't think so. So the player's guide, the initial book, the initial core book, is more about getting people hitting the ground, running, and playing. Like, here's a fistful of our alien origins. Here is the rules on how to build a spaceship. Here's how to have your spaceships do things in game. Here's the factions that you can play for if you're playing in the Throne World Saga. If you're not, here's a handful of factions that are kind of generic in style. You work for the pirate guys. There's that that style of stuff. The Game Master's Guide is going to have a lot more about space exploration, so tables to generate planets, that kind of thing. Whether you're like a crunch build, like here's how to build your own universe, I think everything will be there for you to be able to run your own universe. But you may have to decide how far down the crunch you want to go. We're not doing like technology levels. I worked for Traveler years ago. So I know what you're asking. So we're not doing technology levels or anything along those lines, but there are definitely feels. Like when you look at the list of equipment, there will be a few items that you're like, oh, that feels a little low tech for a sci-fi game, and then three things down, you go, oh, that's a bow that uses inspiration to shoot. Okay, so you like there will be there will definitely be opportunities for you to do so. Right. Captain Martin, why is Fistful funny?
I was trying to figure that out too. So let me ask you, Brian. I can't remember if we asked you this at PAX, but like, if you could pick, you had free range to pick whatever cinematic property you could to do. What is your cinematic adventure ideal?
For Everyday Heroes or for IGH? I mean, I know they're compatible, but for Everyday Heroes, if we just give me an action setting, I would love to do like a Mad Max. I mean, I know it's a little sci-fi-ish, but like not hard crunch, but more like, does anybody remember the short-lived, it was like 2 seasons, a show called Jericho? I worked on the D20 version of that at Mongoose back in the day, and I loved that setting. I thought it was an absolutely fun world setting. Batteries were your currency, like double A's were like, I thought that was a really neat way of doing things. And I would love to see an Everyday Heroes version of something like that. For Intergalactic Heroes, obviously, the two big ones on the chopping block would be getting to do anything with Star Trek or Star Wars. That would be that's Disney money, like that you can't yeah. But something that would be like on the kind of on the D low. I would love to do the Orville.
Okay, yes.
I think that it's got the right kind of tongue in cheek for gameplay around the table. You get that joking atmosphere. But the later seasons of the Orville had enough actual like legitimate intergalactic conversations, and you found out a little bit more about the bad guys, and there's definitely stuff that could be there. And I would love to, and it would give me an opportunity to possibly get to work with Seth, which would be. I've already ticked one box getting to work with Zack Snyder. I would love to tick another box of like one of my other media heroes. So yeah.
I would play the hell out of an Orville cinematic adventure. You're right. I mean, it started out very lighthearted and funny, but by those later seasons, it's like a very serious Star Trek show.
I have my personal opinion is I think Seth MacFarlane wanted to do a Star Trek. He wanted to do a Star Trek style spoof, and the only way for him to be able to get in the door, he was like, oh no, it's just a spoof, it's just funny, check out all these all this blue humor. And they were like, okay, the Family Guy wants to do it's sci-fi Family Guy, okay, cool. And then he was like, all right, now that we're in the door, here's all these good stories. There's an episode that deals with time travel that is simply, and I'm a Doctor Who fan, is simply the best version of time travel that I've ever seen. The best execution of it. In all my years of sci-fi imbibing, including Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the show takes itself very seriously. I mean, it turns on like a dime where you're like, this is sci-fi, like at its core.
Yep.
I absolutely loved it. So okay, what else we have here, including Bill and Ted? How dare you?
Martin, how dare you? Bill S. Preston, Esquire, Ted Theodore Logan, they're my heroes.
Oh yeah, man. Well, okay. So let me throw one more thing at you. In the intergalactic heroes, is there anything when you're writing any of this stuff or putting anything out there? Is there anything you pull from your real life as like an Easter egg for the people that you know, like closest to you, where you'd be like, let me drop this in here because Greg is going to recognize this, or like so and so is going to recognize this.
There might be. I did that a lot more earlier in my career, where I did a lot of NPCs named after friends. I think half of my son's role-playing game characters have made it into things because it's a way for me to kind of give him a little hat tip and give him something to hopefully be proud of his dad about. But I think the closest thing to an Easter egg that I am aware of that I put in there is it's related to my son. The iconic ace pilot, Ronick Elites, is my kid's name backwards. So it's not a character he's played or anything. It's just basically a way for me to put a little bit of myself in the world, kind of. But other than that, yeah.
I love that, man. That's what I like to imagine too. Like I'll read through certain things in rule books and stuff, and I'll see artwork that I'm like, there's something about this that tells me that someone put this in here. It's like someone's kid, it's someone's wife, it's something like that. Or reading through lore and like you hit something that doesn't quite fit right, and you're like, this is pulled out of someone's home game or something. Which I think is great. Like when a writer sort of like drops a little bit of themselves into the work because it's very personal.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the way I felt about like Vampire the Masquerade. It's a very personal feeling rule book. There's a lot to it
Absolutely.
that's like very human in it.
Absolutely.
So we got a few minutes left here. I want to make sure I keep this open for anybody else, but I guess if you had to give 1 to 3 pointers to someone who's like coming into maybe they're a new GM, maybe they're new to Everyday Heroes, maybe they're new to RPGs in general. What would you say as as a writer yourself, their jumping off point for being like, this is what you need to do to run a successful game. This is what you need to do to create a successful universe.
I think first and foremost, before I would answer those, I would say every person needs to come up with their definition of success. Because if your definition of success is to make money, like if I want to try and which there's nothing wrong with it. I've taken many gigs just because it's a paycheck. But if your definition of success at that moment is I want to be able to build this and be able to sell it, I want it to be lucrative, then you do need to kind of make that definition early on, because you're going to be shooting for you're trying to shoot for the mainstream. You're trying not to create something that's super niche because you're like, this is going to be the thing that is going to be a cult classic. Cult classics don't make money. That's why they're cult classics. They exist ad nauseum afterwards, but like initially they're almost always flops. And that's because they focus at a very individual person, that thing that they're looking for. But if your success, what you're trying to look at for success is, I just want people to enjoy what I'm building. I just want people to play it. I want it to be out there in the world. I want to share it, but I don't know hundreds of people that can come to my house and play this. Then you kind of roll up your sleeves and go, okay, this is just going to be for fun. I don't necessarily care if it's super balanced. I don't care if it's, ultra deep. Does it have to have a 100-page backstory? Probably not. You're just coming up with something fun and interesting for that moment. And and then the third version of success is, am I trying to make something that I think is going to survive its initial launch? You know, is it a flash in the pan? Is it I just want people to play this once and go, okay, cool? Or do I want people to play this, read it, imbibe it, and go, I want more. I want to see the next chapter. I want to know what happened. You know, remember those two guys in chapter 2 that lived? I want to know what they did. Where's the deli that they opened up and ran? You know, like you get to go. You know, if your version of success is to try and figure out that next step, then just never stop writing. Never stop. Just never stop. Never stopping. Because you never know when you'll be able to go back to it and you'll have the bandwidth to actually do that second chapter, or you know, the little memos and notes that I've got all over my desk. You've read any of my novels, there's several times that you'll meet a character that you might really dig, and he doesn't die. They don't die. They don't get blasted or anything, but you never see him again. I might want to come back to them at some point. You know, I do a lot of hanging chads when it comes to those characters that are, you know, sitting around waiting, because most of the stuff that I work on is in the gaming industry, and my thing is I want the DM, I want somebody, like if it's a Shadowrun book, I would love for someone to go home and grab one of those characters and make an NPC out of them. And go, remember that guy from that book, from that story, that you guys are talking to him now. You know, I want to try and make them, fill them into their own worlds and places. If that makes any sense. I probably just went off on a down the way. We have a bunch of stuff popping up.
Yeah, we do. I think I'll start with the when writing a campaign, is it okay to not have the end of it flushed out if you have the first couple adventures done before starting it with players?
Absolutely. 100%. I generally, so I recently did there's a book coming out from Goodman Games later this year. I'm not going to shill for them. I don't remember the name of the book, but I did a chapter there specifically about adventure writing, and my chapter is on tent poles and side quests. If your tent poles, the things that prop up your campaign, the important moments that have to happen. The king has to die, the dragon has to be born, the princess has to take over. Pop, pop, pop. Your temples are there. If one of your temples is not the end, you can always come back to that. You can always, if that's not the most important thing, then you're good. There's nothing wrong with it at all.
Excellent. I think we got time for one more. I'm just going to pick this here. Baron Vark. Trope-wise, sci-fi really nails the ship as a character approach. The easiest. Is that something you feel is a good thing to include for TTRPGs, even if the ship isn't being played by someone? Interesting question.
I think so. I think that you could personalize your ships to the best of your ability, and I think one of the best ways to do that is not to make the ship just a set of vehicle stats. If it's got 70 hit points, it has a strength of 5, like if it's just stats on a page. I say the same thing about characters too, is when someone looks at me, my least favorite thing in role playing, when someone goes, well, my character build is this. No, I don't want to know your character's build. I want to know who your character is. And I think that the biggest thing with starships is the same way. Is that instead of going, well, I've got 2 torpedo tubes and no. What are you? The Millennium Falcon. We know that it's a Corellian. What is it? Not a Corvette.
Corellian cruiser.
The YT 1400, I think.
YT Freight. Edward's got this.
Thanks, Ed. It's a that. Do we know that it's got 2 turbo laser, turreted batteries and upfront particle casters? Sure. But that's after the fact. What we know about it first is that it's this old ship, that it can make the Kessel run. The first time you see it, they describe it, and it's this, that hunk of junk. There's ways to introduce these things that aren't just the numbers on a page. And that's what actually makes something not just an asset, but an actual character as part of the thing. And I think starships can absolutely be partially setting and 100%.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Brian, for coming out. It looks like the next round of games are about to get started, and as
YT
usual, man, it's
1300.
always a pleasure to chat with you, man. I have a great time just listening to you talk about this kind of stuff. It's always a good time, man.
I appreciate it. I wish we had more time. I would continue chit chatting all day long. And in fact, if anybody wants to hear me pontificate, every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time, I have my YouTube show Tales from a Professional Nerd, where I often pontificate about all things random.
Awesome. Well, I'll be subscribing to that. Thanks again, Brian, and thanks everyone else for joining us.
Everybody, enjoy your Nacho ConLine.